They were icons who defined entire eras, voices that moved nations, talents that shattered barriers, and souls who carried both the weight of fame and the burden of expectation. Yet, behind the applause and flashing lights, many of these legends were betrayed not by strangers, but by the people closest to them, the ones who promised to love, protect, and stand by them. This is not a story about fame. It's a story about betrayal, abandonment, and heartbreak, the kind that ends careers, crushes spirits, and sometimes even claims lives. Today, we uncover the haunting tragedies of 21 black celebrities whose lives were cut short or scarred forever by partners and loved ones who turned affection into poison. 1. Jimi Hendrix, a guitar god lost in silence. When Jimi Hendrix picked up a guitar, he didn't just play it, he rewrote what music could be. Born in 1942, Hendrix rose from poverty to become the most electrifying guitarist the world had ever seen. His legendary performance of the Star-Spangled Banner at Woodstock in 1969 was more than music. It was a cry for a generation, explosion of pain and defiance captured in 6 strings. But brilliance didn't protect him from betrayal. On September 18, 1970, Jimi was found dead in a London flat he shared with his girlfriend, Monica Danman. The official report said he choked on his own vomit after mixing red wine and sleeping pills. But almost immediately, questions swirled. Why did Monica's story about discovering him keep changing? Why did she delay calling an ambulance? And why did she attempt to revive him by giving him more wine? A choice doctors later said likely sealed his fate. The coroner ruled it accidental. But for fans, suspicion lingered. Had carelessness taken his life, or had Hendrix, like so many other black artists before him, been failed by those closest to him? He was only 27, forever locked in the tragic 27 Club, his flame extinguished just as it burned brightest. Hendrix gave the world a new sound, but in the end, silence, not music, defined his final moments. 2. Rick James, When Love Fueled the Fire. Rick James was chaos wrapped in sequence. Born in Buffalo in 1948, he swaggered through the funk era with unforgettable grooves like Super Freak and Give It To Me Baby. His music was wild, erotic, and addictive, just like his life. But behind the stage persona, Rick's relationship with Tanya Hijazi became a storm that swallowed him whole. Their love was equal parts passion and destruction. They fought publicly, reconciled privately, and plunged into cycles of drugs, arrests, and scandal. Friends said Tanya fed his worst impulses. Others insisted Rick pulled her into his hurricane. By the 1990s, cocaine and excess had taken a toll. When Rick died of heart failure in 2004, he was only 56, utterly alone. Tanya had long since left. His family kept their distance, and friends avoided revisiting the chaos that had defined him. Love is a hell of a drug, Rick once wrote. For him, it was deadlier than cocaine. His story is not just about excess, but about how toxic love can destroy even the brightest fire. 3. Minnie Riperton, the angel who faded alone. Minnie Riperton's voice was otherworldly. Born in Chicago in 1947, she possessed a 5-octave range so pure it seemed divine. Her 1975 ballad Lovin' You remains one of the most iconic love songs ever recorded. Yet behind the perfection of her music, Minnie was quietly fighting for her life. Diagnosed with breast cancer in 1976 at just 29, she endured brutal treatments while continuing to perform. To audiences, she appeared radiant, but those closest to her knew the truth. She was often sitting alone in hospital corridors, waiting for a husband who rarely showed up. Richard Rudolph, her collaborator and spouse, seemed preoccupied with his own career, while Minnie faced her battle with little emotional support. By 1979, the cancer had spread. She died at only 31, leaving behind 2 children, including future actress Maya Rudolph. Her voice gave the world love in its purest form. Yet in her own final days, that same love deserted her. Minnie Riperton's death wasn't just a loss of talent. It was a reminder of how even the strongest lights can flicker out when left alone. For Sam Cooke, or a change that never came. Sam Cooke was the voice of possibility. Born in Mississippi in 1931, he rose from gospel choirs to become the king of soul. It's Like You Send Me and A Change Is Gonna Come cemented him as both a romantic crooner and a civil rights figure who gave voice to Black America's hopes and struggles. His life ended in controversy. On December 11, 1964, Cooke was shot at a Los Angeles motel. The manager claimed she acted in self-defense after Sam stormed her office searching for a woman who had vanished with his money and clothes. The case was closed quickly. Yet doubts have never died. Some pointed to his troubled marriage with Barbara, who had been in heated arguments with him. Others believed there was more to the story, that betrayal, not chance, sealed his fate. He was just 33 years old. His funeral drew tens of thousands, but the haunting truth remains. The man who sang of hope and change was silenced before his time. His voice promised a brighter future, but betrayal cut his song short. 5. Harold Melvin, the visionary left behind. Harold Melvin built dreams out of harmony. Born in Philadelphia in 1939, he founded Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, of soul's most influential groups. Teddy Pendergrass as lead singer, the group delivered timeless hits like If You Don't Know Me By Now and Wake Up Everybody. But by the 1990s, Harold's body was failing. Diabetes and heart disease left him frail, reliant on caregivers and nursing staff. Friends who visited recalled something even more heartbreaking than his illness. His family rarely came. Days turned into weeks without a single visit. In March 1997, Harold died at just 57. There were no grand headlines, no massive tributes. The man who gave the world music about love and unity died largely forgotten, abandoned by those who should have stood by him. His story is proof that fame fades, but neglect lingers. 6. Jackie Wilson, Mr. Excitement's silent pain. Few performers lit up a stage like Jackie Wilson. Born in Detroit in 1934, he earned the nickname Mr. Excitement, with hits like Lonely Teardrops and Your Love Keeps Lifting Me higher and higher. His voice soared, his dance moves thrilled. He was pure electricity. Behind the dazzling smile, Jackie's private life spiraled. In 1961, a jealous lover shot him during an argument. Bullet lodged near his spine, too dangerous to remove. From then on, Jackie lived with constant pain, nerve damage, and declining mobility. Though he tried to keep performing, each show became harder. His once energetic stage presence dulled as his body betrayed him. Eventually, he collapsed mid-performance in 1975 and never fully recovered. For nearly a decade, he languished in a care facility before passing away in 1984 at just 49. The tragedy was not only his physical suffering, but that the betrayal which wounded him came from someone who once swore to love him. Jackie Wilson remains a soul pioneer, but his story is a stark warning. Sometimes love doesn't heal, it destroys. 7. Donny Hathaway, a voice drowned in silence. Donny Hathaway's voice was velvet and pain woven together. Born in Chicago in 1945 and raised in St. Louis, he grew up surrounded by gospel before becoming one of the most soulful singers of his generation. Timeless tracks like A Song for You and unforgettable duets with Roberta Flack, his music carried raw emotion that touched millions. Behind the brilliance was a man tormented by inner demons. By the late 1970s, Hathaway struggled with severe depression and paranoid delusions. He confided to friends that he believed his apartment was bugged, his phone tapped, his very life manipulated by unseen forces. His mental health struggles were compounded by a deep sense of betrayal. He often felt abandoned, even by those he loved most. On January 13, 1979, Donny's body was found on the sidewalk outside New York's Essex House Hotel. He had fallen 15 stories. The official ruling was suicide, but those who knew him questioned if despair and a lack of support from the people closest to him had pushed him past the point of no return. His death silenced one of music's most powerful voices. Hathaway had given the world songs of love and longing, but his own cries for help went unheard. 8. Florence Ballard, the Forgotten Supreme. Before Diana Ross became Motown's golden child, was Florence Ballard, the powerhouse voice behind the Supreme's earliest successes. Born in Detroit in 1943, Florence was the soul of the group, her raw vocals setting the tone for hits that would change pop music forever. But fame wasn't kind. Pushed aside by Motown executives and overshadowed by Ross, Florence left the group in 1967. She hoped for a solo career, but opportunity rarely came. Her husband, Tommy Chapman, only tightened the chains around her. Friends recalled how controlling he became, managing her money, blocking her career opportunities, and stripping her of independence. The mid-1970s, the once celebrated star was living in poverty, cleaning houses to support her 3 daughters. When she died of cardiac arrest in 1976 at just 32 years old, her light was already dimmed. Florence Ballard should have been remembered as the foundation of Motown's greatest girl group. Instead, she became the Forgotten Supreme, a casualty not only of an unforgiving industry but of a marriage that suffocated her spirit. 9. Tammy Terrell, a star collapsing in love and pain. Tammy Terrell was pure joy on stage. Born Thomasina Montgomery in 1945, she began her career young, singing with James Brown before signing with Motown. But her true magic came when she teamed up with Marvin Gaye. Together they recorded classics like Ain't No Mountain High Enough and You're All I Need to Get By, songs that sounded like romance itself. Behind the music, though, Tammy was carrying scars. Her relationship with James Brown was reportedly violent. Friends recalled her arriving at the studio with bruises and swollen eyes. The trauma, combined with the pressures of fame, weighed heavily on her. In 1967, while performing with Marvin Gaye, Tammy suddenly collapsed in his arms on stage. Doctors discovered a brain tumor. Over the next 3 years, she endured 8 surgeries, clinging to life with remarkable resilience. But in March 1970, she passed away at just 24. Her death devastated Marvin Gaye, who admitted it changed his music and his life forever. Tammy's story remains one of Motown's brightest, yet most tragic. A woman whose life was stolen by illness and whose happiness was stolen long before by the men who betrayed her trust. 10. Phyllis Hyman, the loneliness behind the voice. Phyllis Hyman commanded any room she entered. At nearly 6 feet tall, with regal beauty and a voice full of aching depth, she was one of the most gifted singers of the 1970s and 80s. Songs like Living All Alone revealed the rawness of her heart, loneliness, heartbreak, and longing woven into every note. Music mirrored her life. Phyllis struggled with a series of failed relationships, each leaving her more broken than the last. "I love deeply, they always leave before I'm ready," she once confessed. Alcohol became her crutch, depression her constant shadow. On June 30th, 1995, hours before she was due to perform at the Apollo Theater, Phyllis ended her life at just 45 years old. She left behind a note, affirming what her music had already told the world, that her loneliness had become unbearable. Voice still echoes, filled with pain that now feels like prophecy. Phyllis Hyman's story is a haunting reminder that some of the most powerful songs of heartbreak come from artists who live through it most intensely. 11. Curtis Mayfield, the revolutionary in isolation. Curtis Mayfield was more than a musician, he was a prophet. Born in Chicago in 1942, he used his songs as instruments of change. With People Get Ready and the Superfly soundtrack, he fused soul with social justice, giving a soundtrack to the civil rights struggle. But tragedy struck in 1990 when a lighting rig collapsed during a Brooklyn concert, paralyzing him from the neck down. For most, it would have been the end. For Curtis, it was just another fight. Lying flat in bed, he continued to record music, singing line by line into a microphone, piecing together songs with unshakable determination. Yet what broke him wasn't paralysis, it was abandonment. Friends whispered that his wife had grown distant. The one person he needed most slowly disappeared from his side. Surrounded by nurses and admirers, Curtis still felt utterly alone. He passed away in 1999 at 57. Remembered as a voice of courage, he died shadowed by loneliness. His life proves that physical wounds may cripple the body, but emotional abandonment cripples the spirit. 12. Eddie Kendrick, the falsetto that faded in silence. Eddie Kendrick was the angelic falsetto of the Temptations, his voice soaring on classics like Just My Imagination and Get Ready. Born in Alabama in 1939, he became one of Motown's most beloved stars. But his later years were far from glamorous. In the early 1990s, Eddie was diagnosed with lung cancer after decades of heavy smoking. As his health deteriorated, so did his circle of support. His ex-wife distanced herself, and even former colleagues hesitated to reach out. Proud and private, Eddie never begged for sympathy. Friends saw the pain in his eyes. A man who had once been adored by millions now felt forgotten. He died in 1992 at just 52. Eddie Kendrick's final years reveal a cruel truth. When the spotlight fades, so too often does loyalty. 13. Sylvester, the disco queen abandoned by love. Sylvester James Jr., known simply as Sylvester, was disco's glittering king queen. Born in Los Angeles in 1947, he dazzled with flamboyant style, soaring falsetto, and unapologetic authenticity. Hits like You Make Me Feel Mighty Real became an icon for both music and the LGBTQ+ community. But when AIDS struck him in the late 1980s, fear and stigma drove people away. Once vibrant and larger than life, Sylvester's body grew frail. Yet he still painted his face, still wore his glitter, still smiled for those who remained. The cruelest betrayal came when his partner left him as his health worsened. Abandoned by the person he trusted most, Sylvester faced his final days alone. On December 16, 1988, he died in San Francisco at just 41. His music still pulses in clubs and pride celebrations around the world. But his story remains a chilling reminder. Sometimes the greatest heartbreak is not illness, but being deserted in the fight. 14. Al Jackson Jr., the drummer silenced at home. Al Jackson Jr. was the heartbeat of soul. Born in Memphis in 1935, he was the powerhouse drummer behind Booker T. and the MGs and the Stax Records sound. His rhythms drove classics like Green Onions and backed legends from Otis Redding to Sam and Dave. If Memphis soul had a pulse, Al was it. His life ended violently and mysteriously. On October 1st, 1975, Al was shot to death in his own home. His wife, Denise, told police it was a botched burglary, but whispers in the Memphis music scene suggested otherwise. Months before, she had shot Al herself during a domestic argument. He survived, but the relationship remained volatile. No one was ever charged with his murder. To this day, many believe the tragedy wasn't random, but born of betrayal within his own walls. At just 39, Al Jackson Jr. A steady beat was silenced forever. 15. Walter Scott, a murder written in his own lyrics. Walter Scott's Velvet Voice soared in 1966 with Bob Cuban and the Inmen's haunting hit The Cheater. Irony of that song would later define his life. In December 1983, Walter vanished. Wife told friends he had run off with another woman. For nearly 3 years, his family searched, devastated. Then, in 1987, his decomposed body was discovered stuffed into a cistern in Missouri. Hands and feet were bound. The truth soon unraveled. Walter's wife Joanne and her lover had orchestrated his murder to cash in on life insurance. While the world mourned the loss of a gifted singer, Joanne continued life as if nothing had happened, spending the blood money she had gained from his death. Walter Scott was only 43. The man who once sang of betrayal became its most tragic victim. 16. Barry White, the maestro of love left without it. Barry White's deep, velvety baritone defined romance for an entire generation. Born in Texas in 1944, he became the maestro of passion with songs like Can't Get Enough of Your Love, Babe and You're the First, The Last, My Everything. His music was the soundtrack of intimacy, played at weddings, anniversaries, and love affairs worldwide. But in his final years, Barry faced heartbreak of his own. By the early 2000s, his health was in steep decline due to kidney failure and other complications. Those who visited him in the hospital noticed something unsettling. His wife, Lodian White, once his closest partner, was rarely present. Barry, the man who gave the world love songs, often lay in silence, longing for the presence of the woman who was supposed to be at his side. He died in July 2003 at just 58. Fans across the globe wept, but those closest to him said the deeper tragedy was that Barry White, man who defined love, died without it. 17. Ray Charles, the genius alone. Ray Charles was the very definition of genius. Born in Georgia in 1930, blinded by the age of 7, he transformed American music by blending gospel, blues, jazz, and R&B. With hits like Georgia on My Mind and Hit the Road Jack, he became one of the most important artists of the 20th century. But even legends can die in silence. In the early 2000s, as liver disease ravaged his body, Ray's house was filled with caretakers, staff, and distant relatives. What he longed for most, his wife's presence, was absent. According to those who were there, he would often ask for her, only to smile sadly when she never came. On June 10, 2004, Ray Charles passed away at 73. His funeral was grand, his legacy eternal. But in his final days, the genius was left with a quieter truth. Sometimes the world loves you more than the people closest to you ever will. 18. Melvin Franklin, the gentle giant forgotten. Melvin Franklin was the bass anchor of the Temptations. His deep voice grounding classics like My Girl and Papa was a Rolling Stone. Known as the gentle giant, Melvin was the heart of the group, steady and kind. But behind the harmonies was a man in pain. By his 30s, Melvin was battling crippling rheumatoid arthritis. Steroid treatments weakened his body further, leaving him vulnerable to infection and neurological issues. By the 1990s, his health had sharply declined. Friends who visited him noticed something devastating. His family grew distant. His home felt more like a hospital, filled with staff but devoid of warmth. He died in 1995 at just 52, remembered as dignified yet visibly lonely. Melvin Franklin gave joy to millions, but in his last years, joy was not returned to him. 19. Harry Womack, brother against brother's shadow. Harry Womack was never as famous as his brother Bobby, but his voice carried its own quiet power. Born in 1945, Harry performed with the Valentinos, blending gospel and R&B into music that resonated with raw energy. In March 1974, Harry's life ended violently. After a heated argument with his girlfriend, she stabbed him to death during a jealous rage. He was just 28. His death devastated his family, especially Bobby. Admitted the loss left a scar that never healed. Harry Womack may not be a household name, but his story remains one of the starkest reminders of how passion can twist into fatal violence. 20. Big Mama Thornton, the erased pioneer. Before Elvis Presley sang Hound Dog, it belonged to Willie Mae Big Mama Thornton. Born in Alabama in 1926, she was one of the most groundbreaking blues singers of her time. With her booming voice and fearless stage presence, she helped shape the very foundations of rock and roll. but recognition was fleeting. While Elvis became a legend from her song, Big Mama was left underappreciated, cheated by an industry that stole from black women and gave them little credit. By the early 1980s, she was gravely ill with liver disease. And then came the final blow. Her partner, the woman who had stood beside her for years, quietly left her. When Big Mama died in 1984 at 57, it was as if the world barely noticed. A friend bitterly remarked, "She died as if she never existed." But Big Mama did exist. She paved the way, and she should never have been forgotten. 21. Bobby Womack, A Life of Love and Wreckage. Bobby Womack was both brilliant and troubled. Born in 1944, he rose from the Valentinos to become one of R&B's most influential songwriters and performers. His hits like Across 110th Street and If You Think You're Lonely Now showcased both grit and vulnerability. But Bobby's personal life was a storm. After his mentor Sam Cooke was killed in 1964, Bobby shocked the world by marrying Cooke's widow Barbara just 3 months later. The decision fractured his reputation and relationships. Over the years, Bobby's romances were turbulent, marked by jealousy, manipulation, and betrayal. The 2000s, illness ravaged him: diabetes, pneumonia, Alzheimer's. Yet the deepest wound was not physical. Friends recalled that as his health declined, Bobby was cared for mostly by nurses. People he had loved, fought with, and chased for decades were nowhere to be found. When he died in 2014 at 70, only a small circle attended his funeral. Bobby Womack left behind a rich legacy of music, but his personal life was defined by love that turned toxic. From Hendrix's unanswered cries in London, to Minnie Riperton's lonely hospital waits, to Walter Scott's body hidden by the woman who vowed to love him forever, these stories remind us of a devastating truth. The greatest dangers are not always strangers. Sometimes they are the people we let closest to our heart. These 21 legends gave the world music that still heals and inspires. Yet too many of them faced betrayal, abandonment, and violence when they most needed love. Fame could not shield them. Talent could not save them. Their tragedies force us to ask, what is love worth if it abandons us in the end? At Legends of Black Excellence, we honor not just their songs, but their stories. We remember them not only for how they lived, but for what their endings teach us, that loyalty, compassion, and true love are the greatest legacies of all.